So if you clicked on this video, I'm guessing you want to know how to get stickbow close to deer every single time.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yes. Me. Oh yeah, baby.
In this video, this isn't 5 tips and tricks, this isn't 10 tips and tricks, this is real world examples and setups that I have done that's gotten me within 10 yards or closer of deer. Getting stickbow close isn't just about hunting with traditional bows, but about hunting with compounds as well, because the closer you are, the better chances of making a good shot are, and the easier it is to make a good shot. So out of all the deer that I've killed with traditional bows, most of them have been within 10 or closer. The amount of deer that I've killed, if you're wondering, with the traditional gear is over 10. I don't know the exact number, but it's over 10. I've been hunting with traditional bows for 7 years now, so in that experience I started out as a compound hunter. And starting out as a compound hunter, a lot of the times whenever I was choosing a setup, as long as I was 30 and in, I was perfectly okay with that. But after you switch to the traditional gear, your main goal is to just be as close as possible, because you don't have any handicaps, you don't have any pins, you don't have nothing. The arrow's slower, so they got to be closer so they can't move out of the way of the arrow. You know, you're talking about the difference of 250 feet per second down to 150. A traditional bow slinging a 550 plus grain arrow is probably 160 to 170 max out of a super curve bow that's maxed out at your draw length. Most of the time, a hunting weight arrow out of a longbow, recurve, whatever, that is above 550 in grains is going to be moving around 150 to 160 feet per second. So you want to be as close as possible as you can to the deer. I'm going to walk through multiple examples of times where I was 10 yards or closer. Some of these might be 11, 12 yards. I don't know. I don't even carry a rangefinder with me when I'm hunting with my recurve because I don't really need it. Most of these are going to be around 10 yards because after you get 5 and closer in a tree, you're shooting straight down. And that's kind of a recipe for failure, because your target window at 10 yards broadside deer is like this. And then it goes down to this because you're looking at this angle. If you want to hit both lungs, you have to aim super low, and that's just not something that we want to do. You have a very high chance of hitting too high, maybe only getting one lung, maybe spining the deer. So you really want to get within that 7 to 12 yard range. And even with a compound bow, if you get 6 to 12 yards of a deer almost every time, you're in the money zone. You're not going to miss a shot. There's no reason you should miss a shot and let a deer get away, especially out of a compound that's moving 250 feet per second plus. The deer's not going to have much time to react before that arrow's there. So the importance of being within 6 to 12 yards, no matter whether you're hunting with a compound, no matter whether you're hunting with a recurve, longbow, or even a crossbow, you really need every bit of extra help that you can get. And bow hunting is a game of how close. Realistically, in the woods, you can't hardly shoot over 50 yards because the arc of the arrow is going to crash through limbs most of the time if you're hunting in the woods. Maybe if you're out in a wide open field, or in western country, in like grassland and plains type country, you might be able to get away with it. But as an eastern bow hunter, a lot of the times you're going to be working with thick vegetation and taking long shots. That arrow's going to go right into limbs, and that's not what we want. I've killed quite a few deer in different types of habitat. Where I live right here, there's cattle country with woods that butts up against it. There's kind of river bottomish but steep river bottom type habitat. There's just open oak flats and ridges, and then there's big monotonous timber type deals in our national forests. So the first example I'm going to go over here is in a monotonous timber national forest situation where I got within 10 yards of two does. So I had been hunting this piece of property. I was working at a golf course at the time, and right up against the golf course butted a ton of national forest. Most of this national forest is landlocked from the bottom side, but you can come in from the top and get down to it. However, working at that golf course, I had the ability to just get done working for the day, ride a golf cart up to the edge of the woods, and take off. With this opportunity, I was going to hunt it as hard as I could. At that point, I was so used to hunting heavier deer populations that I really wanted to try to get a real close shot at a deer in this national forest in this monotonous timber setting, because population densities are far lower than they are in, our normal cattle country and flat farm country type deal. So I'd hunted this for a few days. This was Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, of that week, and I had hunted this almost every single day. Quickly, what I found out that year was that it was going to be super hard to pattern these deer into a stickbow range type deal, because just the sheer amount of mass crop we had that year was insane. Every single tree is an oak tree in most of our national forest and most of our woods. You walk into it, they're almost all either a white oak or a red oak tree. There's some cherry mixed in, poplar mixed in, but most of the time in these big mountain stuff, like especially you go up real high, you get scrub oaks, then as you come down, it's just all red and white oak. It's just acorns are raining everywhere, and it's so hard to find one specific feed tree that they're going to come to. So over the course of a few days, I'm just hunting kind of flow areas, saddles, benches, and I'm seeing some deer, but it's just, they're not really getting stickbow close. They're not under my tree where I want them to be, where I can get a good shot at them. The closest encounter I had before Thursday was that Monday evening. I was walking in, and a doe was coming straight down the ridge that I was on, and I just crouched down, and she walked within 10 yards of me. However, there was underbrush, and I nicked some of that underbrush, and there it goes. Realistically, you want to be in a tree in places like this, or at least have enough room to shoot. But after that, I kept picking trees with sign. There was feed sign, there was trails, but there wasn't one deciding factor to where I could just pin these deer down to one spot and be stickbow close. So as the week progressed, as I would be working through the day, I'd be listening to podcasts and just whatever I could do, and then just sitting there thinking in my head, like, how am I going to get close enough to these deer to get a good close shot at them? Well, eventually it just clicked, and I was like, I'm going to go in a separate way than I normally do. I'm not going to hunt the same ridge that I have been hunting. I'm going to try to hunt one of these flat bottoms, because I know the deer have to use them, because if they come off this ridge, they have to go through that flat bottom to get to the next ridge. And some of these deer are coming down onto the golf course at night, so they have to be coming from the top of the mountain or up in the mountain in those laurel thickets where they're probably bedding, and coming down into the golf course, so they might be traveling the flats and not always traveling the ridges. So in this, I decided that I was going to find the freshest deer scat I could find, like that morning or that night previously. So I walk in, I walk down into this bottom, and sure enough, I just come to a couple of oak trees right there, and there was like 4 or 5 piles of super fresh deer scat. I mean, like, had to have been done that morning.
It's a big long bottom right here with like a little stream that runs down it, but there's a full creek going down the other side. Now there's this little high point that separates the big creek from the stream. Then there's another ridge out here, and I know the deer are using this. There's a bunch of fresh crap right here on this side of this bottom, so I decided to come sit over here because I felt like I had the better chance.
And that's when I decided, this is where I'm gonna sit. They moved through here either this morning or last night. this is the tree that I'm gonna sit in. So I climb the tree, I'm sitting there, sure enough, around an hour before dark. Don't know, they kind of came from a different way than I expected. They came out of this super thick creek bottom that was just full of laurel. And I expected them to come from like up, kind of up where I'm facing the tree in the saddle. I'm kind of expecting them to come from here, and they come from behind me this way and circle down. And all of a sudden, they're at 10 yards. I turn my head and look, and there's two does at 10 yards. Well, I reach up to turn my GoPro on, and the bigger of the two spot me. So at that point, I'm like, I'm screwed. So I stand still for as long as it takes them to look away. She finally looked away, but they started kind of getting nervous and moving off. So I come down, grab my bow. Well, then they just stand there, and I know they're pretty far, so I'm kind of questioning whether I should shoot at them or not. So I bring my camera around, turn it on, and she's still just standing there broadside. So I decide, like, I've made this shot 100 times, stand in the yard, I know I can do it, I'm gonna shoot. So I pull back the bow, smack her, hit her right in the shoulder. It went into the shoulder and probably lodged into the offside because it got both lungs. Had I been paying more attention and not be half asleep, because where this was located, I'd get home at 11 o'clock at night and have to get up at 2:30 to get there and get up in the woods and hunt in the mornings. So by that end of that week, I was exhausted and I was just not paying attention. Had I been paying attention, I would have got a shot at this doe at 10 yards and it would have been game over. I ended up getting a shot anyway, ended up killing deer. Sadly, coyotes got to it before I did, leaving it overnight because I couldn't find blood to trail. I just decided to leave her overnight. Coyotes beat me there. So that's the story of that one. But in that monotonous timber with a lower deer density, and every tree and every briar and brush is browse or mass crop, you can still use feed tree logic to find that one spot to just pin these deer down to where you can put them under your tree. All the fresh deer scat was literally at the base of that tree. I climbed that one, that way if they come 10 yards up the hill from it, 10 yards down the hill from it, they're still within 10 yards of me. And if they come to that exact tree to feed, then they're going to be standing straight up underneath me, and it's a done deal. So the next example I'm going to give is actually from last season, and this is a feed tree during a year with a really good mast crop of acorns, but this is an apple tree. Now this apple tree is in this small section of woods right above the road, and it is surrounded by thick brush. So down to the road is open woods, and then you get up to the top of this hill. As you roll over, it's super thick and nasty. There's big briar fields below it, and it's just super thick and nasty. You can't even walk through it. The only way you can go is up to where I killed the deer at. I ended up killing 2 deer there in that spot that year. Last year I spent a lot of time trying to pin down some deer that were feeding around oaks, and I was trying to pin down to one tree and I was struggling. I knew this apple tree had apples on it, and you know, them acorns will last on the ground for a while, especially red oaks. They tend to leave the red oaks to lay on the ground to lose a little bit of their tannin content so that they're sweeter come late season, and they'll eat them later in the season after they've eat the white oaks, which doesn't have such a high tannin content. This is also the same spot that I'd killed my first few deer with a bow, and when I killed my first few deer with a bow, I was shooting 29-pound draw. I had to shoot, I couldn't shoot over 15 yards, you know. I needed them to be close. And this apple tree was the perfect feed tree example of pulling those deer to one specific small spot that you could get close to. And sure enough, every deer I've shot there has been within 10 yards, and the amount of deer I've killed there with a bow, you know, I'm 22 now, but as of last season I was 21. So from the time I started, I killed my first deer with a bow at 10, to the time now I've killed a lot of does. Never killed a buck at that stand. I've seen a quite a few little ones, and I even missed one with my recurve. One of the first years I hunted with it, missed one there in that stand. But I've seen a lot of bucks that little bucks that I've passed up in that tree. But the amount of deer that I've gotten shots at that were 10 yards and under, it was perfect for, me being a beginner and needing to be close, shooting a low poundage bow and shooting a traditional bow. It's the perfect spot because it's the definition of the perfect feed tree in being able to put them onto an X and have them within 15 yards every time. So as you can see in the video, this year both deer come down the same path. They walk right there. First one was probably 7 yards. The next one was probably 8 or 9. Me. Oh yeah, baby. She's toast. She's toast. She is toast. Dead. Oh my God, it just about fell off the tree. I've even missed one in that tree behind me the night before I killed the first one, and she was probably 10 yards, 10, 11 yards. You'll see that the reoccurring theme that I'm going to be preaching here is feed trees, because all these deer are going to be taken in October. Almost all the deer that I've killed, all of the deer that I've killed with a recurve have been taken in October, because our rut here in Virginia don't hit until November starts. They're thinking about it a little bit, but they're primarily just fattening up for the winter season, and the bucks are fattening up for the rut. So this next example I'm going to give is actually an 8-pointer. It's a buck. This is first week of bow season again. Most of these are in the first week of bow season. That's just the golden time. Acorns are just starting to drop. They're starting to drop a lot, and it is perfect time to get in there and get very, very close to these deer. So my dad actually hunted this spot opening day and killed a doe and seen a bunch of other deer. At this point, I had my longbow and I wanted to go kill a deer, so he said, go to this spot. There's going to be plenty of deer coming here. I go there, a bunch of spikes and fawns that I pass up. He made a lot of ruckus in there the first day. So, deer have to calm down and want to come back to this spot. And what it is there's a ridge that goes up, and now it's all oak trees. They're all raining acorns. But there's this one specific oak tree that's super old. It's just huge. And it's full of acorns. Usually it's even got acorns in it whenever there isn't a good acorn crop. This one big oak tree, I've even seen deer just travel past it. It becomes a travel point to them. They want to check this oak tree to see if there's any acorns in it. So they are going to pass this oak tree just on the way traveling. It is a perfect spot to sit. I sat there one opening morning, and I was super sick, so I didn't really want to shoot anything. And I had a doe get away from me. I had a buck that was just like a huge cow horn spike. Just had no points, framed, didn't have no points. He comes past me, and I didn't get a shot at him. Had a 4-pointer come past me, and then had a yearling feed around right at daylight that I didn't shoot. I had sat here for about 4 evenings in a row, and finally the evening before that, 2 does came in right at dark. And it got too dark for me to be able to see them, so I climbed down, let them bump out of there, and just left. Then that next evening, 2 does come by, just traveling by. They were running from something. I don't know if somebody came in behind me and bumped them or what, but they just come running by me. One of them stops 15 yards expect her to duck. You know, she's running from something. She's obviously nervous. Expect her to duck. Doesn't move an inch, and the arrow just barely goes right under her chest and right behind her shoulder, right behind her legs. I'm glad that I missed that deer, because about 20 minutes later, here comes 3 more deer to come feed under that oak tree, and one of them being this little 8-pointer. At that point, I hadn't even killed a buck with a rack buck with a bow, so I'm all excited. He comes in, gets to about 12 yards, standing there feeding on acorns. I don't make such a good shot on him, but he's nervous, so he spins. The spin helps me, and it goes in right in front of his backhand, comes out about halfway up the ribs to his shoulder, and he goes about 100 yards, falls over dead.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So that's an example of, even though having a really high mass crop year where there are deer everywhere, of finding that one single feed tree that they want to come to. And they come to it, and they are going to be within 10 yards if you set up close to these trees. So this next example I'm going to give is actually the first deer that I killed last year with my bow. And this one mixes in travel routes with feed trees. I set a lot of travel routes. I don't kill as many deer that way, but typically if I'm hunting travel, I'm kind of hoping for a buck. In this spot, there's an old logging road. The edge of the woods is nothing but super thick brush on the bottom side of it. Nothing but briars. You really can't even walk into it. It's just this small little oak flat, and it goes up to a ridge before it goes into another mowed field behind it. And every single tree in there is a big oak tree, and they're all, like, if it's a good mass crop year, they're all raining acorns. And last year we had this big hurricane come through, had hurricane damage, and blew over a lot of these big oak trees. So there's acorns just laying on the ground that were still on the branches of these trees. So it was really hard to try to pinpoint these deer into one spot. So what I decided to do is mix in being there to hunt those feed trees with also picking the tree based on travel. So I know these deer like to come from across this field, cross the field and come down into the woods, and I know they like to come out of this bedding below me and come up into the woods. They also bed up on the top of that ridge where it's thick before it goes into that other field and come down this way. And they all kind of congregate into one spot. So this logging road comes in and it bends this way. Well, as it bends this way, it's only about 30-35 yards to the edge of the woods there before it goes down into that thick brush. I can see the paths coming out of there, and I have prior knowledge of hunting here. I know deer come out of that path, I know they come across that field, and I know they bed on that hill behind me. So I get as close as I can to that convergence point where they typically seem to always walk through when they come through feeding. And sure enough, opening morning, had a yearling feed under me, like directly under my tree all morning. Had a spike come by at about 10 yards, and then had a coyote chase a doe and 2 little ones almost straight up under my tree. But the doe went down into the woods because I set up a little bit farther down, and that doe went straight into the woods right where I expected her to. So that evening when I went back, I got right in the bend. Instead of going around that logging road and then setting up about 20 yards from the bend of it, I sat right at the bend of it where I knew that doe went in there with those 2 little ones that was getting chased by a coyote, and right where I knew they would come across the field and angle down towards the corner of that logging road. Sure enough, what happens? As I'm climbing the tree, a whole group of deer come across the field, go straight into the woods. I get settled in the trail that big one went down that was being chased by the coyote. A little one comes up out of it, starts feeding under a big oak tree, and then as I'm sitting there, the whole group of deer that come across the field come right up underneath me. They come from behind me. That was the least expected trail. I expected them to come down. Sure enough, they come right behind me and eventually broke out to my right. So I flipped around in my saddle, put my tether over my shoulder, got to where I get shot. Sadly, the deer walks, an inch out of frame, and Smoker runs 75 yards, falls over dead.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yes. She's down, I think. No. Yeah, she's going down right there. I just watched her go down.
So that's an example of hunting a feed tree mixed with travel routes. So as you can tell, a lot of my philosophy of getting close, stickbow close to deer, is going to do with feed trees. Now if you're in the south and you have less feed trees, you got water oaks, apples, just fruit bearing trees scattered around in the swamps, those deer are going to be hitting one of those trees primarily, and as long as you can find it, you're in good success. But a lot of this Appalachian region is just covered in oak trees, so it's really hard to pick exactly where, but you can still use that logic of finding that one feed tree that they're coming to. There's always a bunch of sign there that you can tell exactly where they're coming to be in that spot. Now, a big thing that plays into this is wind. A lot of the times deer aren't going to come in during middle of the day in October. It's hot, they don't want to move. It's going to be right at dawn or right at dusk. I've had it happen to where they come in early, I've had it where they come in late morning. You never really know, but most of the deer are going to move right at dusk and right at dawn. Your thermals are going to pull you. They're going to play a big role when you're in the mountains, because your predominant wind direction might not even affect where you're at, especially if you're off the top of a ridge. So you really want to play the thermals as they're going to be falling at dusk and dawn. If I go sit in a tree in the evening, my wind might be blowing straight to that oak tree or straight at wherever I'm expecting the deer to be, but I know at dusk it's going to start pulling the other way. It's going to start pulling off a certain direction to where when they come to this tree, they're not going to smell me. And even a lot of the times whenever I'm hunting these deer, sometimes you have to make a setup to where I'm sitting in a tree right here, the tree I want to shoot is right here, and my wind's blowing this way. Your wind's kind of like a cone. As it goes out, it broadens. So you don't want it to be blowing to where you think the deer are bedded and gonna start coming from. But it's okay if your wind's blowing like this and the trail's right here. It's okay. I've killed so many deer with a bow throughout the span of me hunting to where the wind is just, it has to just be passing their nose. That scent just has to be passing their nose, and they just can't smell it because they're just off of that wind direction. I've killed so many deer that way. So wind plays a huge role in it, but as long as it's not blowing directly at them, you should be in the clear. You'll learn over time, like, okay, that deer smelled me. That wind was too close to that trail. So next time I need to be at least one tree over. Then next time you go, you hunt one tree over, and it blows this way. They come up the same trail, and they don't smell you. It barely pulls your wind, a few feet to the right, and it completely bypasses the deer without them smelling you. Anyways, I've made a lot of videos talking about, how to shoot traditional bows, so I really wanted to make a video on how I hunt with traditional bows, because I know some of my viewers are here for that as well. A lot of my viewers are bow hunters, so I'd like to help people just get stickbow close to deer. And a lot of the times, most of the time, I'm killing deer on feed trees. Even whenever every tree's a feed tree, there's still a way that you can pinpoint and be that close. I've had people comment and be like, oh, if you're only learning to shoot a target at 10 yards, a deer will never let you get that close. But you can. I've been that close to deer on the ground. Sometimes even when I'm not trying to, and a deer comes within 5 yards of me, and would have been the easiest shot with a bow in the world. Feed trees are going to be your number one priority. Even into later in the season when bucks are rutting, they still got to eat. Where the does are eating, the does don't go out and look for the bucks. The bucks come and look for the does. So wherever the does are at and they're feeding at, that's where they're going to be near. Their home range is so much smaller, and when they come and eat, that's where the buck's going to be. With that being said, if you hunt those feed trees, the doe's got to eat, and the buck's even got to eat too. He might skip it to go chase that doe, but that doe's got to eat, and she'll probably bring him by that feed tree at some point, even if he's chasing her. So this could even work into November during the rut, and especially during late season. In late season when they go back to primarily feeding, finding feed areas or even feed trees, they're going to go back and hit red oaks that are still laying on the ground that they haven't eaten yet. Especially if there's snow on the ground, you can go look at where they've pawed around in the snow to find those acorns that are still on the ground. So hunting feed trees is a great way to get within 10 yards of a deer. You might hear a lot of guys from the south that's killed a lot of deer with traditional bows preach this, but I hear it less and less out of people who hunt more farm country or hunt more of this big monotonous timber type stuff where every tree's an oak tree. It still works. It's still the same logic. You find sign that is so fresh that you just can't. When I set up in a tree, I want to expect to see a deer. I want to be disappointed if I don't see a deer. As soon as I get in that tree, I want to be so engaged and so expecting that I'm going to see a deer that I'm just eyes wide open and glued to where I'm watching, so that as soon as one starts slipping in, I can see it, be ready, and get my shot at 10 yards when it comes walking by my tree. That was legit, real world examples explaining the setup and what I'm doing, and hopefully this helped you guys. There's a lot of new bow hunters, especially bow hunters getting into traditional bow hunting, so hopefully this helps you break that gap of sitting 30 yards and getting them closer to about 10 yards. Otherwise, thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day. I'm planning on making more videos like this in the future of how I hunt deer with certain weapons and certain terrain features or whatever. When I hunt with a bow, primarily feed trees. Primarily just reading sign, and feed trees. Anyway, thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day. Thank y'all for watching. Expect more in the future. And, y'all keep feeling the spirit.